And here we go.
Sports!
I listen to you guys all the time.
It's awesome.
I'm in the mood for one of your classic anecdotes.
Give yourselves a round of applause.
All right, that's enough. Hey guys, there is someone I want you to meet.
Dave Hooker Show with Caleb Calhoun on Off the Hook Sports. Represented by T. Scott Jones, banksandjones.com, Tennessee's trial attorney from the Ted Russell Ford Lincoln Studio, East Tennessee's #1 volume and customer service dealer, Ted Russell Ford, TedRussellLincoln.net.
We're all part of the same team here.
Now to the Dave Hooker Show on Off the Hook Sports.
Welcome to the program with Caleb Calhoun. I'm Dave Hooker. A full show today, as we're going to break down some Tennessee basketball. Why I think Dalton Connect owes Chaz Lanier an apology, and it's sort of a backhanded compliment of both of them. So we'll get to that here in just a moment. Also, I remind you that we're going to get to Caleb some pretty interesting running back talk, as the Vols have to replace Dylan Sampson. Yet it's kind of funny how most people don't seem to think that is the most significant loss. I think people would point to the interior of the offensive line or the wide receivers, but you're replacing the SEC Player of the Year. My goodness.
Yeah, I mean, it's I think this is just how life goes with running backs nowadays. I mean, like we talked about before, you covered the 2001 team that, Travis Henry, the all-time leading rusher in Tennessee history, left, and people thought running back would be an issue for Tennessee, and Travis Stevens goes out and sets the school record for rushing yards, largely because Travis Stevens played behind one of the best offensive lines in school history that year.
Sure. But he was a good put his foot in the ground and run it sort of guy.
Yeah,
I mean,
one cut and run.
Yeah. And that, had he not done that, he would have gotten killed. We'll get to Tennessee, where they rank in returning production. It's a little bit lower considering what they have done to keep players around. Also, Nico Iamaleava has a secret weapon, considered one of the top 10 returning Pro Football Focus players at their position. It'll surprise you. Hot or cold, we'll preview those running backs as spring practice just about a week away. This day in Tennessee football history. Kirby Smart says Johnny Manziel is a champion of Fireball. Pretty good line. It'll be Bank on It, brought to you by Commercial Bank. Are the SEC and Big Ten the only two teams capable of producing a national championship? So we've got a lot to get to on the program. It is time for today's tough question. That's brought to you by Banks and Jones, Tennessee's trial attorney, banksandjones.com. All right, good morning, everyone. And by the way, to those that have won prizes, they all went out yesterday. So, Steve, I see you on there. Please hit that like button if you don't mind. I'd greatly appreciate that. And if you would like to, you can make fun of my nose zit, because I have something like a thing on my nose, the very tip of my nose, Caleb. So it looks like from A Christmas Carol, and I'm like hit the gin all night or something. But can you notice? Do I look like Rudolph there or what?
Little bit. Maybe you told a lie and your nose got bigger.
Well, isn't that the only thing that keeps growing on men is noses and ears? I've always heard that.
Noses grow on men?
I've heard throughout their lives that's the only thing that continues to grow.
Wow.
Have you not heard that?
No. I'm sure women wish that was not the parts of the body that was the only parts that grew.
Agreed. You're thinking pecs. Today's tough question brought to you by Banks and Jones, Tennessee's trial attorney, banksandjones.com.
Today's tough question. Boom. You heard that. Now take it. The Dave Hooker Show with Caleb Calhoun. Represented by T. Scott Jones, banksandjones.com, Tennessee's trial attorney. From the Ted Russell Ford Lincoln Studio, East Tennessee's #1 volume and customer service dealer, Ted Russell Ford and TedRussellLincoln.net. Now to the Dave Hooker Show on Off the Hook Sports.
All right, have we overestimated Tennessee's returning talent? Because I think most of us would have followed this narrative. That is, Tennessee used their NIL money to keep players around as opposed to going out and getting as many players. I think Tennessee only had 6 transfer guys in, and quite frankly, there were a couple of them that I was very suspect on. So that's been the narrative that we've kind of followed, Caleb. But you pulled up some numbers that make me wonder if we were being too overly optimistic. Please hit that like button and subscribe if you have not at this point. Caleb, share some of those numbers with our loyal listeners. We do love you.
Yes, so Bill Connolly of ESPN tracked the returning production for all 136 FBS teams in college football, and Tennessee was down at number 58. Now, that alone wouldn't freak you out. Typically, the more like highly talented teams don't return as much talent. Like, that's just kind of the way things go. They lose more to the NFL. They expect a little more attrition. Fine. The problem is that's not the case.
Let me interrupt for a second. I wouldn't have said 58 freaked me out. But when you told me that yesterday, I was a little bit surprised. I would have thought they would have been top 20, top 25.
Right. No, I get what you're saying. What should freak you out is this is a rare year where the SEC in general, most SEC teams are returning a ton of talent. There's a reason no head coach in the SEC was canned this offseason, by the way. That's kind of a rarity. And
I think also, Caleb, that not only Josh Heupel, but all SEC coaches or all high-level coaches are figuring out this transfer portal thing, and it might be a good idea to keep your players in-house as opposed to throwing cash at an unknown.
Exactly. So with that in mind, Tennessee is number 11 in the SEC in returning talent. More importantly, though, they are 7 of their 8 SEC games are against teams that return more talent than them. And the only one that doesn't is Georgia. And that's not necessarily the one that you would really care about if they don't return any talent. You know that they have a factory of talent down there.
True.
So,
now today's tough question was, have we overestimated Tennessee's talent? Then I'm going to morph it into our poll question, if you don't mind. I have. I will go ahead and tell you, I don't know about we would include you, but I definitely have. I would have thought they would have been top 20, top 25. And I understand that this number is a little goofy in that a lot of great teams can be lower in terms of returning production. But I will say this, I was surprised. So I have overestimated Tennessee's talent this season. You?
I have too, but I'll play the other side on this because I actually did a little more digging on this, and some of this is skewed. Tennessee got wrecked with attrition on offense. I mean, just absolutely obliterated. That's where the problem is. They return only 49% of their production on offense. Their defense, by the way, if it was just defensive production, they'd be ranked number 22. Their defense returns 67% of its production and is ranked number 22, which is really, really good. The problem is the offense loses the SEC Player of the Year and their running back. They lose 3 interior offensive linemen, and they lose all 3 of their main rotational receivers from last year. Now, of those things, let's take a step back, though, and there's some good news to bring up here. One, they returned Nico Iamaleava. That's good news. They returned their quarterback. They returned both tackles. And also, Dave, I think you would agree with me on this. I don't feel like losing their receivers is much of a loss this year because the players they have behind them, they were all in the system last year, except for Amari Jefferson if he becomes a starter. So they're familiar with the system, and I think they might be better than the receivers that were there last year.
Amari Jefferson's not going to be a starter this year. I've just seen too much from this coaching staff that they're not willing to play guys early. And I think he's got the hip injury in the offseason. It's going to limit him in spring practice. So
let me ask you,
let me share this from David real quick. We rotated a lot on offense and defense last year, so we have a lot of guys with playing time. Very true. Good point, David.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a lot of guys ready to go. I mean, I think Mike Matthews is ready to go. I think Braylon Staley is probably ready to go. Chris Brazzell is back. I mean, Mike Matthews and Chris Brazzell have plenty of experience. They weren't the 2 main wideouts, but I think they're ready to. Let me ask you, Dave, would you take Mike Matthews and Chris Brazzell going into this year, or what we found out about, or the Brew McCoy we saw last year and Dante Thornton, who couldn't stay healthy?
Well, if you had asked me before the season, I would have taken that group. But when I started to hear Brew didn't have that explosiveness late in preseason camp, I would have probably backed off that. So let's change it. Our poll question: does Tennessee have enough talent to win a championship this season? Today's tough question brought to you by Banks & Jones, Tennessee's trial attorney, banksandjones.com.
Why Banks & Jones? Well, it's because they're Tennessee's trial attorney. You can play to win with Banks & Jones because they'll go to trial. You've heard of other lawyers. They say they'll go to trial and fight for you. They won't. They just want to settle. That's the easiest way out. Well, that's not Banks & Jones, led by T. Scott Jones. They won't settle. they'll go to trial for you. Tennessee's trial attorney. They play to win. Truly, Tennessee's trial attorney when it comes to criminal defense or personal injury. Why settle? It's Banks and Jones. T. Scott.
All right, Caleb, I'll ask you the poll question, today's tough question, all wrapped into one. Does Tennessee have enough talent to win a championship this year?
Yeah, I think they do, but because they have the quarterback and they have a couple of go-to targets at receiver, they have just enough weapons to do it. Will they do it? I don't know. A lot of this is dependent on how good I think Nico Iamaleava can be. I will be the first to acknowledge I jumped the gun on him insanely last year, but that doesn't mean that he can't still get to that point. And I think that we had a lot of, I was jumping the gun, but we had a lot of people like Heath Schuler came on, Jimmy Hyams talking to us about it, that they never rejected the idea that Nico Iamaleava could get there. They just didn't think he'd get there last year. So I think they, with another year in the system, maybe he could. And so I'm not going to walk away from my prediction that Nico Iamaleava could be gaudy in this offense. Maybe he just needed a year to get used to things.
Well, if you look at history, a lot of these guys at the skill positions have needed a year. Dylan Sampson needed a couple of years. The receivers have needed an extra year. We had guys step in that we thought would be great, but ultimately it seems to be like a 2-year plan with receivers, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Basil, Thornton, Hyatt. I could go on and on and on of guys that had a big impact in year 2 or 3, but didn't have a big year in year 1. So I think Braswell Matthews will have a big impact and be really good and play at a high level. So I'll say that I think Tennessee does have enough talent to win a championship. But you notice how I kind of played that off. I didn't say national championship. It could be an SEC championship. But I do think that they have to have the breaks go their way. I think the breaks could go opposite of Georgia and they could still win a championship. But I think Tennessee has to have the breaks go their way.
Totally agree. And I think that, and the thing is, with Tennessee, the breaks could go opposite, and they could go, instead of 12-0 or 11-1 or 10-2, they could fall to 7-5. I mean, I just want to bring up some of the teams ahead of them real quick in this returning production. And Dave, you can run down with me what you think, but I'll just go through them all real quick because I think you'll find them interesting. But starting with, and these are teams on Tennessee's schedule, by the way. Kentucky at number 52. That doesn't matter, right?
Agreed. I mean, you can have returning production and it could be returning terrible production.
Exactly. Same with Mississippi State at number 37, right?
Yes. No, Tennessee is going to be the more talented team. I don't care if they have 20 returning starters or 3.
Yeah, exactly. All right, now here's where it gets interesting. And I think Tennessee fans should be very scared of this one. Alabama at number 35.
That to me is troubling because you would have expected more of a mass exodus with a new coach in Kalen DeBoer, right?
Yes, and Alabama in the 247 Sports Composite, we're not going to deny that they're still top 5 in talent. They're still ahead of Tennessee in just number of talented players on their team. Great. When you factor in number of talented players and more returning production, and the fact that Alabama's probably going to take a bigger leap than other schools this year, right? Because it's their second year in a coach's system.
You would think.
And Tennessee has to go to Alabama. That's a really troubling one for Tennessee, if I'm being honest with you guys.
Now, David says, I would be surprised to be in the national championship unless the offense surprises with Nico. Matt says we're definitely not stacked like some other teams. Unsung, I thought, nailed it. They have the talent. Question is, do they have the depth all around? That's been the biggest sore spot, right? If somebody goes down in recent years, Tennessee has not had the depth to be able to replace them.
No, but the good thing for them is a lot of teams don't have that depth this year. Now, 3 more teams real quick.
Really, theoretically, nobody should have the type of depth that Georgia and Alabama had now with the transfer portal the way it is.
Yeah, totally agree. So going to the other 3 teams, I'm gonna go a little bit out of order, but one's the trickiest, so I'm gonna save them for last. But Vanderbilt has second in the SEC and number 8 overall in returning talent. Doesn't matter, right? Doesn't matter. Tennessee's beating them in Knoxville.
Agreed. I wrote a column one time, one of my very first columns at the News Sentinel, and I went back and charted how much these guys had played. And Vanderbilt, after 4 years, actually rated the highest because they had guys stick around their program so long. And I wrote the column and I sent it in. And John Adams called me and goes, "Oh, you can't write that. Vanderbilt, the best recruiting team? No." So at some point, just sheer, you don't let analytics get in the way. Just go ahead and make what's a quality judgment.
Well, yeah. Well, in this case, it'd be analytics would be the combination of talent and returning production. But okay, 2 more on this, and this is the scariest one for Tennessee. I'll say this: Florida at number 18. That's a concern for Tennessee because they're at number 18. They also return their quarterback. Tennessee has to go to Gainesville. And if you look at 247 Sports Talent Composite, I mean, Florida, they haven't done their 2025 numbers yet. There's a good chance Florida's ahead of Tennessee, just roster-wise.
So where do we stand with the poll question here?
50-50. Does Tennessee have enough talent to win a championship? But what are your thoughts on Florida? How scary is Florida?
I don't believe in their quarterback nearly as much as you do. So I think we're a little bit different in that regard.
But they're so high and they have more talent around everywhere else. Like if you really look at the composite, there's one tricky one, one last one I want to name, and it's on Tennessee's schedule. Oklahoma's number 10 nationally. Now, Oklahoma goes to Knoxville. I know Tennessee beat them last year, but with so much returning production and probably an upgraded quarterback, are we sure Oklahoma can't beat Tennessee?
Well, it sure seems like a classic revenge game, doesn't it? So I would be surprised, but I wouldn't rule anything out. There's no question about that. So let's change.
So
go ahead.
We're talking Oklahoma, Alabama, Florida, and obviously Georgia as potential losses on the schedule. If you just go by this and then talent.
Yep. So let's change up the poll question. Still 50-50 roundabout?
Yep.
Okay. I want to ask this. What is Tennessee's Achilles heel? Is it injuries or lack of depth? Is it wide receiver? Is it interior offensive line? You can pick the 4. Just make sure the injuries are part of it. Show represented by Banks & Jones, Tennessee attorney, banksandjones.com, as we broadcast from the Ted Russell Ford Lincoln Studios.
Like a blast from the past, the Super Dealer is back. Look to the skies, Knoxville. The Super Dealer is fighting for price, service, and the American-made. Ted Russell Ford is your Super Dealer, just in time for Truck Month. Save up to $5,350 on this new Ford F-150 XLT Hybrid, or save up to $7,000 on this new Ford Expedition. Come see the Super Dealer today at either Ted Russell Ford.
Stat of the day. They never lie. Or do they? Stat of the day. The Dave Hooker Show with Caleb Calhoun. Off the Hook Sports.
Stat of the day brought to you today by our friends at the Hemp House, the premier hemp dispensary online with a wide variety, great selection, and strict standards. Go to hemphousechatwith2ts.com. Use the promo code HOOKED for 10% off. hemphousechatwith2ts.com. Use the promo code HOOKED for 10% off. Caleb, our stat of the day is...
And this is in a column, and we're going to talk about it later. Dave will be able to address because it's an amazing stat. But Chaz Lanier became just the other day, the 4th player in Tennessee basketball history to hit 8 3-pointers in a game when they beat Texas A&M, joining pretty good company: Chris Lofton, Jordan McRae, and Allen Houston.
It's pretty good company. Let's get to, if I can hit the correct button, which I think I can. What the H? Brought to you by Rick Terry Jewelry Design.
What the H?
Wow, I've never worked hard on anything. What a cool life.
For real? The Dave Hooker Show with Caleb Calhoun. Represented by T. Scott Jones. Banksandjones.com. Tennessee's trial attorney. From the Ted Russell Ford Lincoln Studio, East Tennessee's #1 volume and customer service dealer. Ted Russell Ford and TedRussellLincoln.net. Now to the Dave Hooker Show on Off the Hook Sports.
So this question from David on our message board. Please comment. We'd love to get to your comments. If Matthews or Brazel goes down at receiver, who do you play? Jefferson, Jackson, or Smith, all unproven freshmen? I mean, I think depth is an issue, but if you're healthy, then I don't think it's an issue because Tennessee doesn't like to go deep in their rotation on offense anyway. So I think that's okay. But Caleb, what's our poll question now? Let's reset that before we get to Nico Iamaleava's secret weapon.
Yeah, so the question is, what is Tennessee's Achilles heel? Lack of depth, interior offensive line, no proven skill players or linebackers.
Okay. We'll reset that. We'll get a standing on where that is. But first, let me ask you this, Caleb. If I told you that Chris Brazel was a secret weapon for Tennessee, or that, I could keep going here. I could even go Peyton Lewis is a secret weapon for Tennessee, or I could go Mike Matthews, a secret offensive weapon for Tennessee. I would be way off base because according to Pro Football Focus, there is another young man who has established himself and will be one of the top players at his position this fall. Tell me about Miles.
Yes. Miles Kitselman is the one player not named Nico Iamaleava who is a top 10 PFF player returning in college football at his position. Just for context, Nico Iamaleava is 9th nationally among quarterbacks, PFF quarterbacks this year. That's only 5th in the SEC, though, behind Diego Pavia, DJ Lagway, Arch Manning, and Garrett Nussmeier. But Miles Kitselman at tight end is actually 2nd in the SEC and number 7 among tight ends returning this year, according to PFF. The only guy ahead of him in the SEC is Eli Stowers at Vanderbilt, who's number 1. But yes, Miles Kitselman, according to PFF, and here's their quote, was following a year at the JUCO level and 2 seasons at Alabama as a backup, Kitselman broke out his senior year after transferring to Tennessee. He finished 2024 as the 7th most valuable tight end in the nation, according to PFF's wins above average metric, and ranks 4th among returners at the position. Kitselman was also one of 4 tight ends in college football with top 25 PFF grades as a receiver and a run blocker. He hasn't dropped a pass in his college career.
Well, he only caught like 10 at Alabama, in all fairness, or maybe
True, but that's still pretty impressive to not have a drop for his career because he did get a lot more involved last year in the offense, and he kind of emerged. And at 250, and we forget this, and they bring this up, at 6'5", 256, he's uniquely big for a tight end and a unique advantage for them.
Now, okay, so let me ask you this: if Miles Kitselman is the secret weapon, instead of on the message board, we've got Boo Carter. We've got one person asked, will they dip into the spring portal? I don't think so. But if Miles Kitselman is the secret weapon and the go-to player, did Tennessee have a good season?
I'm going to say yes. Whenever your tight end is a secret weapon, that's usually a recipe for success.
I tend to agree with that. I mean, Mike Matthews and Brazel are going to beat him in a 40-yard dash, right? Probably more talented athletes. But that doesn't mean that in any shape, form, or fashion that he can't be a focal point of the offense. And I think that's just fine.
Oh, exactly. And for context, when Josh Heupel was offensive coordinator at Missouri in 2017, Albert Okwuegbunam, I think I pronounced his name right. He was an All-American tight end there. He, in Josh Heupel's last year at Missouri, led the team in touchdown receptions with 11, which is how Missouri shocked everybody, went to a bowl game that year, which is what got Josh Heupel the head coaching job at UCF. So Heupel, if he has the right tight end, is not scared to make him his go-to playmaker. And Okwuegbunam was 6'5", 258 pounds, very similar to Kitselman's size, 6'5", 256 pounds. So that's like the type of tight ends Josh Heupel loves. And we know this with Jacob Warren, by the way, too, with the way he uses him. Josh Heupel loves big tight ends in the red zone. I mean, loves them as receiving targets in the red zone. And I thought one of the, the first year he got to Tennessee, Princeton Fant was the guy to catch passes between the 20s. And then once they got into the 20, they would put Jacob Warren in. Then after that, they started alternating drives.
Here's my concern if I'm Miles Kitselman. And I think he's very good. Don't get me wrong. I think Ethan Davis, though, may be a transcendental sort of talent at tight end. And if that's the case, what did Tennessee do with Princeton Fant and Jacob Warren in their senior years? They leaned more on Fant, right? He did special things out of the backfield. He was your goal line guy. They clearly, when the ball was going to be in the air to a tight end, if they could work it out, it was going to go to Princeton Fant. No offense to Jacob Warren, but I think you're just talking about a slightly better athlete. So, Caleb, I would say this. If Miles Kitselman at the end of the season is Tennessee's star surprise player, whatever you want to call it. I think they got troubles for one of two reasons. And that's that Chris Brazzell, Mike Matthews didn't step up, or they didn't have a running back step up, or the second tight end, Ethan Davis, who may be the first tight end by the time preseason camp rolls around, did not step up. So that would be my biggest concern. David says using 12 personnel to flex Miles or Ethan Davis in the red zone could be deadly this year. Totally agree.
What if it's this? And let me ask you this question, Dave, because I think this is a very strong possibility. Ethan Davis has more receiving yards than Miles Kitselman, but Miles Kitselman leads the team in receiving touchdowns.
I could see that.
Because they get inside the 20, you know, like, I feel like once they get inside the 20, they're going to want to just throw it up to Miles Kitselman, right? Who can guard him in the red zone?
I could definitely see that. But ultimately, who do you want to be Tennessee's standout player? Caleb, I'll ask you that. So again, I'll argue that if it's Miles Kitselman, the season didn't go exactly as planned. Hang tight. 30 seconds from Double D Piping.
Double D Piping provides full-service fire protection on any scale. From residential homes to government facilities, we can assist any customer through design, fabrication, installation, inspection, and demonstration of fire suppression systems. With 30 years of service across 5 states and a full staff with over 40 years experience, our quality can't be beaten. Don't get caught watching what you could have prevented. Call Double D Piping.
So I want to reset the poll question. What is it right now, Caleb? Got enough feedback on that.
All right, what is Tennessee's Achilles heel? And I'll go ahead and give the results. 38% say lack of depth, 23% say interior offensive line, 31% say no proven skill players, and 8% say linebackers.
Okay, I got a thought for you if you want to go in this direction.
Okay.
Who will be Tennessee's star player on offense? And don't include Nico because everybody's going to vote Nico. But let's go Miles, let's go Mike Matthews, Chris Brazzell, and then a running back to be named later, which we believe is going to be Peyton Lewis, but nobody's completely sure at this point. I'll be interested to see where that shows up. Again, give us your vote and your thoughts on the chat board. We greatly appreciate that. Everybody's high on Deshaun Brom. I am too, but I think Ethan Davis has that second position filled. I really believe he's elitely talented. I mean, not just good, but really good. Now, Dylan says, my main issue with Ethan Davis is his injury history, and sometimes he's afraid of contact because of his injuries. Very fair. Very fair. Because he is a former basketball player type. Think of Antonio Gates. And yes, I think that is going to be a concern for all those basketball types. I can remember covering a defensive tackle out of the Washington area, Eddie Goldman, and there was concerns about his toughness. He was a basketball guy, preferred basketball, but he happened to be 6'5", 320 pounds. So he was definitely going to play football. Caleb David says, I want Mike Matthews with 50 to 60 catches for 1,100 yards, 12 TDs ideally, but 3 guys with 500 yards, 5 TDs work.
All right, can I give you my ideal stat line for Tennessee this year? If you're a Tennessee fan. Mike Matthews has 1,100 yards receiving. Chris Brazzell and I'll say Braylon Staley as a slot guy each have about 600 yards receiving. Ethan Davis has 400 yards receiving. Miles Kitselman has 250 yards receiving, but 12 touchdowns. Basically, all his catches are touchdowns.
Yeah, I could go with that. We're not even talking about the running back position. I mean, if Tennessee gets 1,000 yards out of Peyton Lewis, how big is that for this offense?
Oh, that's huge. That's absolutely huge. But I mean, it might be by committee for them to get the running backs to 1,200 yards. I mean, I'm thinking, I'm pulling up, if everybody wants to return to the 2022 offense, just for context, Jalen Wright had 875 yards. Jabari Small had 734 yards. Now, part of that was Hendon Hooker was a part of the running game. I think more than Nico Iamaleava was going to be because Hendon Hooker ran for 430 yards. They used him on a lot of those plays. But then when it came to receiving, Jalen Hyatt had 1,200 yards. Brew McCoy had 600 yards. And Rel Keaton had over 500 yards. And so, yeah, I think that's my ideal number. But, of course, Jalen Hyatt also had 15 touchdowns.
Yeah, and with Jabari and Jalen, I mean, they split it pretty even. It was probably about 60-40. So I wouldn't expect a guy to have over 1,000 yards in that scenario.
No, I wouldn't either.
This year, they might be stuck with Peyton Lewis being their primary guy. No offense to Deshaun Bishop, and we're going to preview the running backs here in just a moment, but I don't think that's outside the realm of possibility. What's our poll question again, Caleb?
Yeah, so who will be Tennessee's star skill player on offense? Miles Kitzelman, Mike Matthews, Chris Brazel, or a running back to be named later?
I think it's a running back to be named later. What do you say?
I think it's Mike Matthews. They went Mike Matthews was their Nico for the next class, and I think this was the year that duo is supposed to take off. If it doesn't take off, then you got to start asking questions of Josh Heupel, because it's kind of like, remember how Dabo built Clemson when he got Taj Boyd and Sammy Watkins together?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's what this is. It's Johnny Manziel, Mike Evans, isn't it? Where you got like
Those are pretty good dudes. I think Johnny Manziel is like the best playmaker I've ever seen, and Mike Evans is one of the best receivers I've ever seen.
But Josh Heupel went for Nico and Mike Matthews to create that type of duo, didn't he? That was the goal.
Yes, and go ahead, finish your point, and I want to get to General Ursus's point.
Yeah, so I just think that that's all I was saying, is that I think that like those are the expectations you kind of want if you're Tennessee at this point. But yeah, I'll go Taj Boyd, Sammy Watkins more than Johnny Manziel, Mike Evans. I get it. Johnny Manziel, Mike Evans is like, that's the gold standard of quarterback receiver.
General Ursus said, I think Mike Matthews needs to be the breakout star player. He was highly recruited and was a 5-star. Well, you do lose a little recruiting panache if he's not, because you've had 2 5-star players in Nico and Mike Matthews and we'll see what David Sanders does, another 5-star. But if you haven't proven to high school prospects that you can get them involved early, right now, I think that's a big issue with Tennessee, then it's going to start to hurt you in recruiting at some point. And it may have already.
Yeah, it's going to start becoming a big deal. And I mean, if Mike Matthews and Nico are not a deadly duo next year, and if David Sanders Jr. is not seeing the field as a true freshman, given how highly touted he was as a tackle, you're going to start seeing a lot of questions going in.
We definitely have the best listeners in the biz. David says Chris Brazel should be the guy if you go by Heupel's recent history. Older guy in his second year in the system. Injuries aside, that's pretty accurate.
Yeah, but you see Mike Matthews and you see Chris Brazel. Doesn't Chris Brazel strike you as more of a Ramel Keaton type?
You know, Chris Brazel strikes me as a big dude that's hard, it's impossible to cover, that can get open downfield and win jump balls. So to me, Mike Matthews, to your point, is the better overall polished receiver. But man, I'm not selling Chris Brazel short. I think if he's your street guy, so to speak, I think you'll be just fine.
All right. Well,
streak is in playing naked, but
I get what you're saying.
Okay. Sports Treasures, carrying over 5 million sports treasures and so much more. Follow on Facebook for the best sports memorabilia, daily updates. Go to facebook.com and Sports Treasures TN, against Sports Treasures TN. Now, plot twist by our guy Dylan. What if it's Boo Carter?
I mean, I still think that's possible. I think that's what Boo Carter wants. I think that's why there was this idea that he was flirting with the transfer portal in the offseason. He wanted to get more roles on offense.
If it is Boo Carter, if he amasses over 250, 300 yards from scrimmage, Tennessee's offense has had a really, really good season. If they're able to dole out some touches to him, that to me is pretty impressive.
What if Boo Carter's in New York at the end of the year?
Wouldn't completely rule that out, but it seems like a bit of a reach. Obviously, you're making the comparisons with Travis Hunter, Colorado. There seems to be that love affair right now. Timothy had this to say, Caleb, he's super chatting you so that money goes to Quincy Calhoun's college fund. So what do you have to say there?
Wahaha, Caleb, LOL, you were such a negative Vol. Yesterday it was ugly win. Now it's Heupel's fault for players not doing what they are getting paid for. All good, though. Well, Timothy, I'm not a Vol. I cover the Vols, but also I appreciate the super chat. I really do. I love you, Timothy. But I also have to point out that I'm the one putting the expectations on Nico and Mike Matthews to live up to what Nico and Mike Matthews were recruited to do. So I don't know if that's being negative on them. I think I'm putting the expectations on them to live. I'm the one who just invoked Johnny Manziel, Mike Evans.
Right. And for all the discussion we had about other skill players, if it's not ultimately Nico is the superstar, if he's not winning a couple of SEC Player of the Weeks and perhaps in the running for SEC Player of the Year, this season has gone awry.
If we're not talking about him going to New York in November, the season's gone really awry. I'm not saying he has to go to New York, although I think he should have to go to New York. But like in November, we should at least be in the conversation of like Hendon Hooker 2 years ago, right? Like what he's got to do to get to New York.
I got no problem with that. Rick Terry Jewelry Design. They want to be your jeweler looking for affordable game day jewelry, a Tennessee tradition. Go to rickterryjewelry.com, rickterryjewelry.com. A preview of Tennessee's running backs. So if we want to throw up a poll question about that, we can certainly do that. As we love your interaction. The show represented by Banks & Jones, Tennessee's trial attorney, banksandjones.com, broadcasting from the Ted Russell Ford Lincoln Studios. Give me 2 minutes, complete running back preview coming up next with Caleb Calhoun. I'm Dave Hooker, off the Hook Sports.
It's a new year, a new day, and Ted Russell Lincoln has an exciting new offer to share. Right now, get a 2024 Lincoln Navigator with 0% APR for 72 months and up to $4,000 in bonus cash. Or drive away in a new 2024 Lincoln Corsair Grand Touring with 0% APR for 60 months and up to $4,500 in bonus cash. It's time to get excited about the ride. Come and see what a luxury car experience truly is at Ted Russell Lincoln Knoxville.
Now in its 45th year, the second and third generations continue Joe Newbert's commitment.
His vision of what this business needed to be, we still try to live up to that.
Joe Newbert Collision Center.
Having been in the jewelry industry for a long time in the Knoxville community, I saw a need for a jeweler, a real jeweler.
Our ability to do these designs has really been based on the customers bringing new things in and challenging us as a store. Our goal is not to tell anybody what they want. Our goal is to listen to what they want and then help them get there.
Schedule your consultation today to get your special someone the perfect custom gift just in time for the holidays.
Hi, Mike Davis here with City Heating and Air, reminding you to always dare to compare. Our team provides quality local heating and air service, installation, and maintenance across East Tennessee. We use only the best equipment like American Standard heating and air conditioning for your residential, new construction, or commercial needs. Honesty, dependability, and customer satisfaction have been the cornerstones of our business since 1961. City Heat and Air.
Dare to compare.
Double D Piping provides full-service fire protection on any scale. From residential homes to government facilities, we can assist any customer through design, fabrication, installation, inspection, and demonstration of fire suppression systems. With 30 years of service across 5 states and a full staff with over 40 years experience, our quality can't be beaten. Don't get caught watching what you could have prevented. Call Double D Piping.
Ginger Power, the Dave Hooker Show with Caleb Calhoun. Represented by T. Scott Jones, banksandjones.com, Tennessee's trial attorney. From the Ted Russell Ford Lincoln Studio, East Tennessee's #1 volume and customer service dealer, Ted Russell Ford and TedRussellLincoln.net. Now to the Dave Hooker Show on Off the Hook Sports.
All right, Caleb, this day in Tennessee sports history, also hot or cold, brought to you by City Heating and Air Conditioning. But first, let's visit about the poll question. What do we have up right now?
All right, so who will be Tennessee's star skill player on offense? We got Miles Kitselman, Mike Matthews, Chris Brazel, and a running back to be named later. And Mike Matthews is leading by an outright majority of 53% right now. And then a running back to be named later at 21, Chris Brazel at 16, and Miles Kitselman at 11.
Okay, so who did you think would have been Tennessee's star offensive player other than Nico at the skill positions last year?
At the skill positions, my money was always on Squirrel White. Didn't happen, but it was always on Squirrel White. I don't think it was Squirrel's fault. He got hurt.
No, I agree. I thought it was Brew McCoy until they got about halfway through camp. I mentioned that earlier. And there's started to be talk about he doesn't have the same explosion, which is a shame, but that's when I started wondering. And then I was probably Squirrel White with you because they had utilized the slot receiver with Jalen Hyatt to win the Biletnikoff Award.
They also made a mistake with Brew McCoy in this way. They should have altered their offense a bit because they still kept trying to scheme him open with those typical like bare, wide open moments downfield. I thought if you design more underneath routes for Brew, he's so deadly with the ball in his hands. Even after losing a step, how many times was he shedding tackles and adding?
But they had more screens than the where they shot Dirty Dancing. I mean, they threw a lot of passes underneath. I mean, did you get that screens? Yeah.
No, I'm
Not
sorry.
really. Okay. I was trying. Hot or cold brought to you by City Heating and Air Conditioning, cityheatandair.com.
Where do you stand? Hot or cold? Brought to you by City Heating and Air Conditioning. Integrity matters. 50 years in East Tennessee. Cityheatandair.com. On Off the Hook Sports.
Okay, we're going to preview Tennessee's running backs brought to you by City Heating and Air Conditioning. Integrity matters, 50 years in East Tennessee. So are you hot or cold on the following running backs? And if you want to fill it in on the chat board, we'll get to your comments as much as we can. They're a little delayed. I'm going to start from the bottom. Dwayne Morris.
Okay, Drake.
Are you hot or cold or Dwayne Morris?
I'm actually hot on him. I thought this was a very key in-state pickup. Tennessee went after him late, but he ran track in high school, comes out of Murfreesboro, and kind of the all-purpose type of back that I think is a great change of pace that Tennessee's going to go with. I think that's a guy they could use more than people realize.
I'm hot on him because I think he'll be better than his recruiting ranking necessarily, but I'm more hot on him for 2026 than 2025.
I think I'm with you on that.
Yeah, I mean, we just have to accept the fact that Josh Heupel is not getting guys involved in the system early in their career. That's just a fact, and I don't know that changes anytime soon. Justin Baker, hot or cold on Justin Baker?
See, that's who I'm hot on for 2026. I'm cold on him for this year, though. I mean, Justin Baker, I think, is not going to see the field much this year. I think that just for depth purposes, I think he's a guy that Heupel hopes will be his feature back in a couple of years, but I don't think he's going to see the field this year.
I tend to agree with that. Justin Baker, I think, will have a nice career at Tennessee. I don't think it's in 2025. Now we start getting into a transfer guy and two guys that have played and are expected to have a big contribution this fall. However, I want to do this. I want to judge everybody on a scale. So if you're hot on Peyton Lewis, Caleb, I would just say that you're really hot because we both believe he's going to be the leading rusher, right?
Correct.
Okay, so you got to be pretty hot. But let's start with Star Thomas. Hot or cold?
I'm cold. I think he got Star Thomas for depth just in case Peyton Lewis goes down. And they paid him a good bit of money. And they said, hey, we need a backup running back at Star Thomas. I guess he followed the NIL money. And he said, hey, I'd rather be a backup at Tennessee. And maybe I could play if Peyton Lewis goes down. But I actually am pretty cold on Star Thomas. I think that was a purely depth decision, honestly.
I completely agree with that. David says, I'm Team Bishop. Call me a Knoxville homer. Now, I'm all about it. I'm a North Knoxville homer. So the Carnes and Powell area are close by. So I'm all about that. We'll get to hot or cold with with Bishop and Peyton Lewis coming up. Brought to you by City Heating and Air Conditioning, cityheatandair.com.
Hi, Mike Davis here with City Heating and Air, reminding you to always dare to compare. Our team provides quality local heating and air service, installation, and maintenance across East Tennessee. We use only the best equipment like American Standard Heating and Air Conditioning for your residential, new construction, or commercial needs. Honesty, dependability, and customer satisfaction have been the cornerstones of our business since 1961. City Heat and Air. There's your bed.
Okay, Dylan says, if I had to guess, it's a three-man split, 40-40-20 between Lewis, Bishop, and Thomas. I don't know if Thomas is going to get that much, Dylan, but we're pretty close to the same on that. I think Bishop's going to get about 40%. I think you're going to see Peyton Lewis get about 50%, and then 10% to be divvied up among a bunch of scrubs.
I'll get there. Let's finish our hot or cold first, and then I'll give my breakdown.
Hot or cold, Deshaun Bishop?
I'm hot on him seeing action this year, but I'm cold on the action people expect him to see. I don't think he's going to be the number 2 back this year. I'm just going to say that. I think he's going to dip to the number 3 back. But
you would be very cold on him, and history would think that there's something to that. I mean, he's not a big guy.
He's not a big guy, and he's just limited. Last year, the only reason he played was because Peyton Lewis got hurt at the beginning of the year and never really kind of got involved with, got into a rhythm with the offense.
Derek said Peyton Lewis is going to take 70% of the carries, mark it down. I'm not sure that I'm going to disagree with that. And then also on our chat box, General Ursa says, Bishop is my pick. I'm glad he signed with the Vols. So many times we've seen these home kids go elsewhere, but I don't know if any of them can live up to what Dylan said, referring to, of course, Dylan Sampson. Now, let me ask you this about Peyton Lewis, because here's the standard I'm going to put on it. If you're hot about him, he's got to get over 1,000 yards. Is that fair? Or do you want me to say 850?
No, okay, I'll go 1,000.
Okay, I'm hot on him too. I think he gets over 1,000.
I'm really hot on him. I just don't think there's much of another option. And Peyton Lewis is a genuinely unique feature back. Never got into rhythm last year, and so I think Peyton Lewis is going to be incredibly good. So my move, and I'll address Timothy Super Chat for a minute. My prediction is that Peyton Lewis gets 60% of the carries, Dwayne Morris gets 30% of the carries, and Deshaun Bishop gets 10. So, like, that's how I think it's going to break down. Dwayne Morris is a change of pace all-purpose back, but Peyton Lewis is the workhorse. And then every now and then, if they both need a rest, Deshaun Bishop will come in and get some touches.
You do have to remember this, too. Deshaun Bishop should be markedly better than last August when they entered camp, right? Because he's played.
I think Deshaun Bishop played as well as he could possibly play given his limitations last year. I really do.
Bigger and stronger. You would, Travis Stevens, you would have probably said the same thing about him headed into his senior year, wouldn't you?
Travis Stevens was big enough to pass block, and when he played. Deshaun, it's not like Deshaun Bishop's lazy. He gets wrecked every time he tries to pick up a blitz. He just gets destroyed, and that's a big problem. And it's not for lack of effort. He's just not big enough to pick up those blitzes, guys.
Timothy, with our super chat, what do you got? It goes to Quincy Calhoun's college fund.
Timothy says, my complaint about Heupel is his offensive and predictable and him not developing the freshmen when older players leave. Timothy, I actually do agree with you on that. We still haven't seen Heupel do a good enough job developing the freshmen when older players leave, but this year's the first real test for him doing that. This year, more than ever before, there's a lot of guys that are highly touted that he recruited that are expected to step into roles with other players leaving. So we're going to have to see how that goes.
Another super chat from Timothy. We appreciate that. We'll get to the rest of the comments in the chat box. All-purpose yards. That's right, when we don't use running backs like that. I will say this. If Deshaun Bishop is going to have a serious impact in 2025, they've got to find unique ways to get him the ball. Because if Peyton Lewis is the running back we think he is, Caleb, he's even more locked into the tackle box than Dylan Sampson was last year, right? Dylan Sampson can get outside. You're expecting Peyton Lewis to hit the A or B gap at full speed. So they've got to find ways to get Bishop the ball in a creative way. That's why the Boo Carter thing scares me, to be real honest with you. If you're trying to do the same thing with Bishop and Carter, Caleb, I don't know. I think you can get caught up in the mud a little bit, if that makes sense.
Are we misreading what they want to use Boo Carter as? Do they want to use Boo Carter as a running back?
I would think that he would be a slot. I would think that he would be a guy out of the backfield. You don't hand him the ball to run and inside, but you could do a slip screen. You could do something like that. That's the way I envision it. What about you?
That's what I was thinking too. But I'm like, now that we're talking about it, what if they're just finding ways what if they're going to put him in the backfield and just like hand him the ball? Dave, remember you covered it. Didn't they put Eric Berry on Wildcat a couple of times in 2009?
Yeah, I've got no problem with a Wildcat. Or the G gun. Remember the Gerald Jones?
Gerald Jones, yes, the Gerald Jones G gun.
Yeah.
Yep. Which got figured out pretty quickly because he never threw the ball.
All right. You want to hear an Uncle Dave story real quick?
Let's roll.
Dave Clawson referred to it as the G gun in a press conference, and Philip Fulmer was right behind him. Well, you know who came up with that name would be me and John Adams on the radio, just being silly. That meant Clawson was listening to the radio, which you shouldn't do as a coach, right?
Yes, that is true.
You're absolutely right. And then so I saw Philip Fulmer at practice later that day, and he goes, "Who came up with that bleeping G gun name?" And I said, "Oh, it was me and John Adams." Bleepity bleep bleep bleep. He was not real happy about that, and I think Dave Clawson got a talking to.
Oh my God, really?
Yeah, you shouldn't pull names or plays or personnel decisions from the media, should you? I mean, we have our opinions, but we don't have the insight coaches have.
No. It's you absolutely shouldn't do that. And yeah.
David says, I think Bishop plays a lot because he's progressed every year like Sampson did. Peyton Lewis is more a bruiser than a burner.
Davis, do you really think Deshaun Bishop has the same physical gifts that Dylan Sampson had?
No. No, I think he's a poor man's Dylan Sampson. I don't think he's quite as fast, quite as quick, quite as big.
Or quite as strong.
Or quite as strong.
Like,
yeah,
he's everything except not as good.
That's not an insult when you're the poor man's version of the SEC player of the year.
When I played basketball, my style of play was like Scottie Pippen's. I played defense and I distributed. I'm just not as tall, fast, or good with handles or in any other. That's the only reason I didn't make it into the NBA.
And you couldn't shoot. But other than
neither could Scottie Pippen. So that one is why it's okay.
Okay, I'm with Derek on this one. Lewis will be the best back we've had under hype. I don't think there's any question about that. I'm that high on Lewis. I'm higher on Lewis than Nico.
I'm not, but I'm pretty high on Lewis. But like, I mean, look, I thought Jalen Wright was pretty good. I just thought he was not used as much as he should have been. But part of that was, look, we're going to one day go back and look at 2023 and say if Joe Milton ever decided to be a running quarterback, Tennessee could have had a deadly offense in 2023. But he was so insistent on staying from the pocket.
What do you think about this day in Tennessee football or Tennessee sports history?
On this day, are you going to give me the hit?
Play the element.
This day in Tennessee sports history.
It's cool, baby. It's cool.
Now you know, and knowing is half the battle. The Dave Hooker Show with Caleb Calhoun, Off the Hook Sports.
All right, Caleb, what do we got this day in Tennessee sports history?
On this day in 2008, 17 years ago, for the first time ever, the Tennessee men's basketball team came out at number 1 in the AP and coaches poll. And it was right after they beat Memphis in that 2 versus 1 matchup. And they came in at number 1. It was first time ever they were number 1. Bruce Pearl, one of the things I always liked about Bruce Pearl that's always underrated is he never really lied about what he thought about his teams, even to their face. So he said during that Memphis game, he's like, I'm not so sure. He actually said, I don't know if we're the best team in the country. I just know we're 40 minutes away from being the number 1 team in the country, which is a very Steve Spurrier-like comment.
Where does that Memphis game rank among non-football sporting activities? Because it got so much hype. It's like ESPN was doing the North Carolina Duke game.
It was huge, and it shut down the whole state of basketball. I mean, the whole state of Tennessee. I mean, like the whole state of Tennessee shut down the whole country with that. The hype was insane. There's an argument that in terms of hype within the state, that's the greatest spectacle for hype within the state ever. Because while Tennessee football games definitely generate more hype than Tennessee basketball games, Memphis football games don't. And there's never been a Tennessee-Memphis football game or a Tennessee-Vanderbilt football game that has generated that level of hype. But it was hype from both sides with Tennessee and Memphis. And it was a huge deal. And 2 versus 1, I mean, that was just the magnitude of that within the state was insane, honestly.
It was bizarre. I mean, it reminded me of ESPN, the way they cover the Ohio State, Michigan football game, or the way they used to cover the Florida State, Miami, or Florida State, Florida, or Florida, Miami games. And I'm talking about football. But as far as a non-football event, I think that's the biggest one in my lifetime.
How much credit, beyond just 2 versus 1, and the traditional Tennessee-Memphis rivalry in basketball, and the city of Memphis being such a basketball town, and Tennessee trying to make history, how much credit for that hype, though, goes to just how well Bruce Pearl and John Calipari played to the media, to their skills of publicity? Because they're both.
It was a big part of it. Because, listen, if you've ever covered football, not you, rhetorically, and you've ever covered basketball, in particular with Calipari and Pearl, they'd kind of bring you into the fold and give you little tips so you sounded smarter on your show the next day. But that never happens. That rarely happens in football, especially not during the season. Nobody's, John Chavis wasn't putting his arm around me saying, it's Prowler package time.
Oh, yeah. Right. That's a very good point. You're right. I feel like Lane Kiffin would do that, though, every now and then, wouldn't he? He'd give you a few little pointers.
He would, but he always ran off the practice field, so I had to run with him, and I was fat at the time, so it was very uncomfortable.
So was that – okay, how about this, personality-wise? Does Bruce Pearl, John Calipari, personality-wise, in the same state, does that rival Steve Spurrier and Bobby Bowden, personality-wise, in the same state?
I actually think it's better.
Really?
Yeah, because Bobby Bowden, he did the poor mouth and stuff. I don't know. Steve Spurrier was special. If I had to rank them, I'd say Steve Spurrier number 1. I'd say Pearl number 2, Calipari 3, and then Bowden 4. So the aggregate would be, I would take those 2.
Maybe Bowden's accent just made him endearing and seemed like a guy who plays in the media well. It's just Spurrier and Bowden had such thick Southern accents.
Well, he always sounded like Foghorn Leghorn too. Do you remember that? I'll tell you what, we gotta stop the kicking game. That's what we got to do. And I loved hearing him talk. I just didn't think there was an awful lot of substance there. It's a great point by David I want to bring up. Oh, I'm sorry. This was the wrong one. Where was it? Okay, Adam had this to say. We may find out that our running backs suck without Cooper Mays and interior offensive line.
Well, we're going to find out how good the interior line is, because this interior line, maybe this is the column, this is the biggest test to Josh Heupel yet. These are interior linemen that have been in his system for a little while. And if not one of them can step in and be effective, then that's a real red flag.
The show represented by Banks & Jones, Tennessee's trial attorney, banksandjones.com, as we broadcast from the Ted Russell Ford Lincoln Studios. Coming up, we will get to Kirby Smart saying Johnny Manziel was a champion of fireball. Kirby Smart doesn't say a lot of stuff like this, but it's pretty darn classic. Give me 2 minutes with Caleb Calhoun. I'm Dave Hooker, Off the Hook Sports.
Why Banks & Jones? Well, it's because they're Tennessee's trial attorney. You can play to win with Banks & Jones because they'll go to trial. You've heard of other lawyers. They say they'll go to trial and fight for you. They won't. They just want to settle. That's the easiest way out. Well, that's not Banks & Jones, led by T. Scott Jones. They won't settle. They'll go to trial for you. Tennessee's trial attorney. They play to win. Truly, Tennessee's trial attorney when it comes to criminal defense or personal injury. Why settle? It's Banks & Jones. T. Scott Jones. banksandjones.com. Dave Hooker here for Dynasty Pools and Spas. Your home for the best spas and everything you need to jump right in. Relaxing? Therapeutic? Absolutely. But what sets Dynasty Pools and Spas apart from others is that you get everything with any spa purchase. You get the cover lift, the steps, delivery, and chemicals. When Dynasty Pools and Spas delivers your spa from their Athens location within 125 miles, you'll get your own personal hydrotherapy spa. Mention me, Dave Hooker, or Off the Hook Sports, and get $500 off your top quality new spa. Dynasty Pools and Spas, just off the Athens exit. Drop in and receive a free gift from Off the Hook Sports, Dynasty Pools and Spas. Mention Off the Hook Sports for a drop-in prize and that $500 discount, Dynasty Pools and Spas. To check out some of the Dynasty Spa models and to buy spa chemicals, go to dynastypoolsandspas.com. Dynasty Pools and Spas.
Now in its 45th year, the second and third generations continue Joe Newbert's commitment.
His vision of what this business needed to be, we still try to live up to that.
Joe Newbert Collision Center.
Are you ready to get strong? At NFC, we offer top-notch weight training and functional fitness, so you can build strength and improve your performance. Join today at nfc1.com or stop by any one of our 7.
Guy with a lot of jobs, but this one is the most important.
This is not government work. As such, I treat it with care and attention.
Until someone else calls. The Dave Hooker Show with Caleb Calhoun. Represented by T. Scott Jones. banksandjones.com. Tennessee's trial attorney. From the Ted Russell Ford Lincoln Studio, East Tennessee's #1 volume and customer service dealer. Ted Russell Ford and TedRussellLincoln.net. Now to the Dave Hooker Show on Off the Hook Sports.
All right, Caleb. So a little off topic here, but what does Adam have to say in the chat box?
Adam says Pearl started Stephen Pearl and Skylar McBee once he was established. Tennessee giving Bruce a kick into A revived his career. I disagree with you on the Skylar McBee point. He was good, but yes, the Stephen Pearl thing was a little. I mean, that you shouldn't have been starting Stephen Pearl. All due respect.
Here are my thoughts on that. I thought that Bruce Pearl was a very good coach when he was at Tennessee. I think he's become an elite coach. So I tend to agree with Adam's assertion that he needed a kick in the rear.
I think Bruce Pearl's early success at Tennessee. Look, we talk. It's a classic fame getting to your head, but nobody got caught up. Nobody got swept in their own hype more than Bruce Pearl when he thought he was above everything at that point, didn't he? And I mean, we're talking about a guy who, like, the minute he became a celebrity in Knoxville, left his wife for how much younger woman? And so
not a bad game plan. Here we go. So Derek said you all dogged this offensive line group too. I haven't. I just got questions for it. David said this year will show if LRB can actually develop blue chip offensive linemen. And then this comment from Derek: I see us being fine, but if the run game blocking slips any, people's jobs will be in jeopardy. So
yeah, we haven't dogged the O-line group. We've dogged the fact that nobody from the O-line signed out of high school has started for Josh Heupel yet. I'm not putting that on the O-line fully. I'm questioning their player development from guys out of high school and their evaluation, but we'll find out this year.
Yep, definitely will. And then you had Kirby Smart decides to take a random shot at Johnny Manziel. So what do you got on Kirby Smart taking a shot at Johnny Manziel, who sure is doing fantastic? I see all these documentaries about how great he was, but ultimately didn't pay off. But Kirby Smart taking a shot at Johnny Manziel. What did you think about that? Because I'm going to take it a step further. So give us what Smart said about Johnny.
Well, I'm going to play the clip because it's actually better if you play the clip. But speaking at the Nike Coaches Clinic, at the Nike Coach of the Year Clinic, Kirby Smart was talking about trying to bring up a point about quarterbacks that has given his defense hell, whether he was offensive coordinator at Alabama or defensive coordinator at Alabama or head coach at Georgia. And he shows 4 quarterbacks, and you're going to see them. It's Joe Burrow, Cam Newton, Johnny Manziel, and Bryce Young. So he's going to ask, what do they have in common? And then we're going to see what someone responds. So here's what we're going to show real quick.
What do these guys have in common? Speak up. Heisman. It's a good answer. That's actually true. They're definitely quarterbacks. That's the most elementary thing. Heisman, quarterbacks, champions. He ain't champion of what? Champion of fireball.
That was a direct reference to Johnny Manziel.
Yes, it sounds like he's talking to like a 5th grade class, which I don't know if those guys were a little slow or what was going on there. But I think this illustrates, guys, and work with me. David's kind of on there. I think this speaks to Kirby Smart's frustration with not being able to develop elite quarterbacks. He kind of sort of did with Stetson Bennett, and kudos for Stetson Bennett. Kudos to that young man as he maximized his talent. I don't think there's any question about that. But now you have Carson Beck leaving. I wonder if Kirby Smart is concerned about what he's been able to do at quarterback. Because if you had to pick something out from their little run of a couple championships, that's a pretty glaring omission on their list of achievements.
It is. And so do you think Kirby Smart has some resentment that a guy like Johnny Manziel gave him hell one time and he can't go turn around and find a Johnny Manziel to give other people hell?
Yes. I don't think there's any question about that, especially with Carson Beck's departure still fresh on your mind. I believe every coach wants to be elite at every position, but I think Kirby Smart and then Nick Saban, before he goes out and gets Lane Kiffin and has a more high-flying offense, Caleb, I believe quite firmly that both of those guys, Nick Saban and Kirby Smart, were frustrated by their quarterback play earlier in their career, and even more so when all the rules are changed to benefit the offense. Your quarterback, whatever the numbers were 20 years ago, they should be doing that plus 25%, right?
Yeah, I don't think Nick Saban was upset about it. I actually think it was the reverse. I think Nick Saban never wanted the quarterback to be the focal point of his team, honestly. And then he realized it was going to have to because of the way the rules were changing. So he went out and adapted. I think maybe Kirby Smart's jealous because what does Nick Saban have right now? What Kirby Smart's saying this. Nick Saban has a Super Bowl MVP quarterback now that he coached in Jalen Hurts. Even though Jalen Hurts did finish at Oklahoma, I get that. But, still was at Alabama, was a starter at Alabama for 2 years and did win a national championship, even though he was benched in that game. He got him there. And on top of that, Nick Saban coached a Heisman winner at quarterback and Bryce Young. And
I think was later in his career.
Right, but I think Kirby would love to have a Heisman winning quarterback, and he'd love to have a national a Super Bowl winning quarterback on his resume. And I could see your point that he's a little jealous that it's not happening. It's also a weird shot for Kirby to throw. I'll just say this, and I don't know if it was a shot or if it was an off. Sometimes you're caught in the moment and you make an offhanded joke because you're like, man, I got to make this joke now because it's like, but like, yeah. And this is a great point. David Speak says Kirby picked Fromm over Justin Fields, and Stetson Bennett over Carson Beck. He looked like he was right about Stetson Bennett though. Stetson Bennett won 2 national titles, and Justin Fields, I will say, is garbage in the NFL. But one of the things I'll say is that Kirby, I get you make a joke in the heat of the moment, but this dude has overseen how many traffic arrests at Georgia to this point in bad behavior? Like, it doesn't.
I didn't think of it from this angle. So is this kind of like the pot calling the kettle black?
Yes. Yeah. Now, Kirby is a champion, unlike Johnny Manziel, but for Kirby to say this, when you have a string of arrests right now that is happening on your campus that you have not been able to get under control, is kind of a problem. And this is the other point. Dave, I don't know if you know this, but there is talk that the future of Georgia is a little bit bleaker than we think. And I'll just give you a quick, I'm just going to bring in Paul Feinbaum, was on Greg McElroy's show, and he says he doesn't feel great about Georgia's future because they took a dip. And his exact quote was, he said, I think just like we used to with Nick Saban, we expect him to play for the national championship, and losing the title game felt like a lost cause. It's almost that way now with Georgia, and I feel like they underperformed. I mean, they came through at the right moment against Texas, but they had so many disappointing moments. But there were just so many decisions made, and talking to fans every day, whether it's true or it's they imagined, they do not like Mike Bobo. And then he says, I don't feel great about Georgia. Now, what does that mean? They're still a playoff team. They just don't feel like a national championship team right now. Now, I can tell you this right now. I got some connections with Georgia. They don't like Mike Bobo. They really don't.
No, I believe that. But I also believe it's just screaming that there's an issue when your starting quarterback, who's definitely going to be your starter the next year, goes to Miami.
By the way, did you see he got robbed in Miami?
He did. He got his Lambo and Mercedes-Benz robbed.
Yep. Maybe don't flash the fact that you got a Lambo and a Mercedes-Benz as a college football player. Maybe just don't do that. But yes, yeah, he got robbed in Miami. Yeah, it does scream that. And again, part of that is the Mike Bobo issue. Do we think this? David Speaks says he has an Urban Meyer problem in Florida situation. I can't go Urban Meyer level. That was like, Urban Meyer was basically saying, I don't care if you kill somebody or you slap your girlfriend, just don't get caught.
I don't know that it's that far, to be real honest with you.
Yeah, I don't think it's as far as Urban Meyer.
No, I mean, I'm saying I don't think it's that far apart.
Oh, you don't think it's that far apart?
Yeah, I think it could. I think because they won and then you saw them get a little soft last year, I think it could be headed in that direction.
Man, that's scary if it's headed to that direction. I thought it was more like the Fulmer direction with Tennessee than it was the Meyer direction. Because Fulmer was a slow decline, and I don't think Fulmer was like sociopathically ignoring discipline. I think he was just maybe compromising a little here and a little there, and then one day he woke up and he screwed up. He compromised too much. Isn't that fair how it went with Fulmer?
Yeah, no, it was. He compromised a lot if you could play. But I think Urban Meyer did even.
No, Urban Meyer, there's no compromise. He said I have no principles and I don't care. Right. Kill who you want, slap who you want, stalk who you want, threaten who you want. And he would basically say, the SEC, it's up to you to kick these players off my team because I got a great Christian quarterback in Tim Tebow. So I got, it's okay if I have killers on my team.
Comment of the day goes to Adam, by the way. If you would like to be a member of the channel, we will hook you up just for $4.99 with a gift certificate to Hound Dogs of Knoxville. That's hdknoxville.com. Champions look good in orange. You get a welcome present just for being a member of the channel, and you'll be eligible for weekly and grand prizes. But comment of the day goes to Adam. What did Adam say?
Manziel and Newton had legal problems. Maybe he's trying to tell his players to get out and break the law. I mean, that's a pretty good one.
They're already doing that, though.
Yeah, they've already got that. That is living up to the standard. Now, to be fair look, let's say this about Johnny Manziel. And this is where we're going to be serious for a minute. look, I have no respect for the person that is Johnny Manziel, because when you waste that type of talent, it just really annoys me. But I will say Johnny Manziel, in terms of legal issues, and even Cam Newton's legal issues, never put anybody's lives at risk. And
True.
Georgia's legal issues, I mean, somebody killed somebody with that. 2 people are dead from it. I mean, it's the same with the stuff Urban Meyer was letting happen at Florida. There were actual victims in these crimes. Johnny Manziel, I guess you could say he's a victim because he was in a bar fight, but like, okay, it was both sides. It wasn't like Johnny Manziel just went and cold cocked somebody out of the blue at a bar. So
the Blind Squirrel Sports had this to say. Also very concerned about Georgia's offensive line issues. With Stacey Searles still around, this might be even more problematic than the OC's play calling. There's a name I hadn't heard in a while, Stacey. Here's what you have to remember about Nick Saban, what he did that was so special. And we've talked about the analyst role, and it helped you because that's why he closed practice, and then those analysts were able to run on the field and essentially be coaches. There's no limit on number of coaches anymore, by the way. I finally got that confirmation from the SEC. But here's the other thing that analyst move did, is you always had somebody ready. You had practically interviewed them for a full football season or 2 or 3 or 4. So you knew not to hire Butch Jones, but if you got a chance to hire Lane Kiffin, you were going to do that. Does Georgia have that going on? Maybe Blind Squirrel Sports can help us, but I don't think so. I don't think they have 20 analysts running around pretending not to coach.
well, the rules are a lot more lax on analysts, so they might actually. And I feel like that's something Kirby would take from Lane Kiffin. I mean, not Lane Kiffin, from Nick Saban, would be smart enough to know.
But see, I thought that was so unique about Saban, that he was so hard on coaches they would leave, but that coaches would show up because they feel like their careers could get rehabilitated. I don't know that Kirby Smart's held in that same regard.
No, but I mean, he again, Kirby Smart's earlier in his tenure than Nick Saban is. The back-to-back national titles did do him a lot of favors. I don't look. I think Kirby Smart. I'll say it this way: I think Kirby Smart's now trying to do something that. I'm sorry,
Derek.
Sorry, Derek.
Kirby Smart's trying to do something to what?
I think Kirby Smart was trying to do something that he successfully did, which was win a national title the old way, pre-Saban, Lane Kiffin, and prove that it could be done. And he did it twice. But then he thought with Carson Beck, he could build around a quarterback in like a standard pro-style offense. And that's, I don't think it worked out the way he wanted. Largely didn't work out the way he wanted because, again, Mike Bobo's there and not Todd Monken. And I mean, there's a massive gap in offensive coordinators. And someone said it on the message board and I missed it. But basically someone said that I think it was David Speaks, that going from Monken to Mike Bobo was basically going from David Cutcliffe to Randy Sanders.
Ouch. Wow, I still remember that interview I did with Randy and his dad at a Cracker Barrel, how he was going to be Tennessee's next head coach when Philip Fulmer retired. That was right before the 2005 season. Oops.
Lord.
Oops.
Yeah.
It was a big takeout piece, too. Like, I practically interviewed the Cracker Barrel employees. Derek says, Urban shows up with your daughter for Thanksgiving dinner. You mentioned Lane Kiffin's name. Who would you prefer to show up with your daughter on Thanksgiving dinner, Lane or Urban?
Oh, my gosh.
Well,
Lane Kiffin or Urban?
Lane's going to be successful, I think, in his initial moves. And I would worry that if Urban's not, being an older and not very attractive guy, I would worry he would get physical given some of his background.
I'm going to say Lane Kiffin because also if Urban were decided to become a football coach again, he would tell one of his players, "Hey, you want to go kill my girlfriend? Go ahead and do it. I need to win a football game." So, I mean, I think Lane would at least dismiss you. Put it this way, I'll just say it: Keith Richardson would not have been dismissed from the team after that armed robbery if Urban were coaching the Vols.
He really wanted to save Mike Edwards out of the trio. I know that firsthand. That was the goal. But as I told him, you can't do this. Quality Tire Pro, serving Chattanooga's community since 1957. All major brands of tires, full service, automotive, brake alignments, oil changes, and more. Go to qualitytirepros.com. Tell Bo that Dave Hooker and Off the Hook said, hey, Bo, how are you? Oh, man. Did we get a P. Diddy reference?
Someone said Urban if she showed up. Okay, we have no proof that Urban's in sex trafficking or like pedophilia or stuff like that. He just doesn't care if his players are doing
Well,
it.
wait, P. Diddy is still weak or innocent until proven otherwise, right?
There's literally a video of P. Diddy following Cassie to an elevator and punching her in the face and knocking her out.
Who's Cassie?
That was his girlfriend. She was a singer. That was his girlfriend for like 17 years. She was trying to run. She was running away from him, trying to get to the elevator. It was like a horror movie. And there's a security footage of he's running after her and he punches her in the face and knocks her out and then drags her by the hair back to his apartment and kicks her.
Okay, let's do this. Poll question.
No, we're not comparing Urban Meyer to Diddy. We can't do that.
Urban Meyer, Lane Kiffin, P. Diddy.
I'm not doing that. I'm not as bad of a person as Urban Meyer is.
You want to make it more difficult instead of who would you not want to show up with your daughter, is who would you not want to show up with your son?
Who would you not want to show up with your son?
That's got to be P. Diddy, right? I mean, it has to be, as we broadcast from the Ted Russell Ford Lincoln Studios.
Like a blast from the past, the super dealer is back. Look to the skies, Knoxville. The super dealer is fighting for price, service, and the American made. Ted Russell Ford is your super dealer, just in time for truck month. Save up to $5,350 on this new Ford F-150 XLT Hybrid, or save up to $7,000 on this new Ford Expedition. Come see the super dealer today at either Ted Russell Ford.
Here we go. This was a huge waste of time, like bringing a married guy to Vegas.
Then there's this guy, the Dave Hooker Show with Caleb Calhoun, represented by T. Scott Jones, banksandjones.com, Tennessee's trial attorney. From the Ted Russell Ford Lincoln Studio, East Tennessee's #1 volume and customer service dealer, Ted Russell Ford and TedRussellLincoln.net. Now to the Dave Hooker Show on Off the Hook Sports.
General Ursus said this. Well, this took a turn. And then David says, and we're off the rails. That's the goal, basically, of every show, is to get off the rails.
And Dylan mentioned Casey Anthony. You know, Urban was in Florida when the Casey Anthony case happened. But
and Diesel 80 had said, wouldn't want Karl Malone around my daughter.
Well, yeah.
This is funny. I didn't know this until my son told me this when he was about 16, that Karl Malone, I never knew that about him. You want to hear?
No one did. I know about it.
You want to hear my Uncle Dave Karl Malone story?
Sure.
Okay, it's a little perverted. Yeah. I mean, it is. I'm just going to tell you. Reset the poll question, if you don't mind. Then I'll get to it.
What's the poll question?
He likes sheep a lot, is all I'm going to say.
That's a weird thing to say. I heard he averaged 20 points, 13 rebounds for his career. Google Karl Malone 2013.
Okay. So Karl Malone opened up a outfitter store. You know what that is? Like you can buy canoes and I don't know what the hell you
an outdoor type of store.
Yeah, whatever. So but it was right in the heart of Pigeon Forge. So it's not going to work because there's like 15 other ones and you're just dropping some cash into there to have your own store because you think it's cool. All right. I like that, Dylan. All right, but let me tell you my Karl Malone story. So we're doing this interview with Karl Malone, and he's like 25 yards over, like maybe not that far, but 25 feet. And we've had to run an extension cord because he wants to be able to shake everybody's hand. So this is basically how the interview goes. So, Karl, what do you think about playing for the Jazz? He's like, hey, it's nice to meet you. Yeah, I'll be glad to sign that. What? And it was awful. It was just awful because he was constantly distracted by the fans. But we got one good question, one good answer out of him. I said, what's your greatest hunting triumph? Because he's big into hunting, not young women. Don't go there. But he's big into hunting. And he said, I'm getting ready to bag the Grand Slam of sheep. And I said, whoa, I have no idea what that means. He goes, no, man, I'm not with them or anything. I'm like, well, I definitely wasn't thinking that. I mean, it's like you keep just burying it down the wrong road. But there are 4 sheep. He didn't have relations with any of them. And if he did, they were all of age, I was told, because sheep year is like 7 years. But Basically, you have to go to 4 different continents and hike around an average of 8 miles to bag this sheep. Yeah, that's all you got to do.
Wow, that's pretty bad.
And I don't know why he was so into bagging sheep. He just had to go to his local elementary school and bag.
Country, Louis. Okay, so here's the real question. Honest, and this is an honest question. What's worse, the act that Karl Malone committed with a 13-year-old when he was 20, which is a horrible act and terrible and should get him in prison alone, or the fact that after the family decided not to press charges on the condition that he would take care of the child, and then he refused to take care of the child and fought them in court for 15 years on child support payments when he was making $100 million? Which one's worse?
I have to be real honest. I didn't know about all that, Caleb.
Yeah, no. So he gets the 13-year-old pregnant. They don't want to press charges because they know he's going to the NBA.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he gets her pregnant. They don't want to press charges because they know he's going to the NBA. They say, we won't press charges. Just take care of the kid. And then he spends his entire NBA career fighting to even have to send her more than $200 a month.
Well,
kid. Which one? That's hard. That's actually almost worse, isn't it?
Well, what's worse? That or being Larry Bird's illegitimate child? Now,
yeah, but Larry Bird didn't have her through pedophilia.
Right. It was of age, but she in turn had to look like Larry Bird. I mean, nobody likes that. But he did pay for her. I mean,
he did. He didn't want a relationship, but he paid.
Not pay like that, but he did pay. So,
right. He made sure she was taken care of. Just like Michael Jordan makes sure his illegitimate children are taken care of. He does. Karl Malone did not want to do that. Karl Malone didn't want to make sure his
illegitimate superstar who has a child in Knoxville, right?
What? Oh, yeah. I knew about that.
Okay, let's not out that right now. Nobody wants to get sued. Yes, a bighorn sheep like a ram. He was essentially ramming sheep. What?
So, which athlete has the most fitting character for Urban Meyer? Karl Malone, O.J. Simpson, Aaron Hernandez, or Kellen Winslow?
Let's get that Urban Lane Karl Malone question up. Can we do that?
I can't compare Urban and Lane to Karl Malone. We can't do that, Dave.
All right. Bank on It brought to you by Commercial Bank, where we take a stand. Commercial Bank is fantastic. Member FDIC, life made better. There's an assertion out there that just the SEC and Big Ten are the only two conferences that can produce a team capable of producing a national championship. I'm like, duh. I mean, could a team creep out of there? I don't know, Caleb, like a Big 12 team. We saw TCU do some stuff. Yeah, I guess that's all possible. But if you made me bet right now, I think the SEC and the Big Ten will produce champions for the foreseeable future. I don't think that changes anytime soon. You?
No, I don't think it does. And this is all happening because this week all the college football playoff leaders, all the conference commissioners, plus Notre Dame's athletic director are going to meet to discuss the future formats of the college football playoff. And it's going to be hard for the SEC and Big Ten to get the unanimous agreement that they want going forward, which is the straight seeding. But the interesting thing about that is, like, okay, it may be hard, but the SEC and Big Ten could also take their ball and go home if they don't get their way. And
exactly right.
So I'm going to split the baby. So this question came because I was watching, I'm going to give him a shout. I was watching Josh Pate the other day, and someone asked, could the Big 12 ever win a title? And he actually said no. The question becomes down to the ACC. Well, like, could a Clemson or Florida State sneak through? And I'm going to say not as long as they're in the ACC. And
I agree.
That's where I land.
I think it's similar to Tennessee and playing a somewhat weak schedule to begin the season. I think you get overly confident. When you play in the ACC, you feel really good about yourself. Now, you could argue the other side of that would keep you healthier longer and into the postseason, and I get that. But Bank on It, brought to you by Commercial Bank. There will not be a non-Big Ten or non-SEC champion in college football anytime soon.
Commercial Bank is your neighborhood bank. What makes us different from other banks? We understand that every customer has unique opportunities, challenges, and financial concerns. We don't expect you to fit into the same box as the next person or business. Whether it's purchasing a home, saving for your child's future, or planning for your next vacation, we're with you every step of the way to navigate life's big decisions.
By the way, Matt wanted to tell us that it's the Stone Doll, Rocky Mountain Bighorn, and Desert Bighorn sheep that Carl Malone was trying to bag, in addition to underage ladies. But Caleb, is that good for the sport if you don't have a champion out of another conference?
I don't necessarily think it's bad for the sport if the SEC and Big Ten gobble up all the blue bloods anyway. Now, I never thought about this, but do we include Notre Dame and just say they're like an exception, or do we think they can never win a national title either, even as an independent?
I don't think they can because of their academic and discipline restrictions. But if you want to include them, I'm okay with that.
If they drop those, they probably could, because they're getting all that money now from the college football playoff.
I mean, they haven't dropped those to get Randy Moss, so why would they drop them to get any players now?
No, yeah, you're right. That's a good point. So, yeah, I'm with you. I think it's going to only be the SEC and the Big Ten, and I don't think the fact that it's that is bad for the sport. Here's what I think is bad for the sport. Dave, the SEC and Big Ten are so big now, it's time to create conferences within the conference. It's time to create mini conferences within the conference. They're too big. Split the SEC in half, split the Big Ten in half, have 8, 9-team conferences where you play round robin, and then your conference champions are there, and then you guys agree where you'll meet in a bowl game afterward. I mean, the conferences are just too big, and they're not going to stop growing. Look, there's going to be a bidding war, and everybody, the SEC and the Big Ten, are going to fight like hell to get University of Virginia and University of North Carolina when the ACC breaks up. They're going to fight each other and do whatever they can to get those two schools. Those two are joining one of those two conferences in 7 years. I think the SEC is going straight for Clemson and Florida State, and I think the Big Ten and SEC might fight for Miami. And there's an open invitation for Notre Dame to eventually join the Big Ten. And I mean, at some point, look, I think so. With that in mind, now, are there Big 12 teams that they can pluck off? I'm not sure. Maybe as Arizona and Arizona State continue to develop fan bases, maybe they'll go for them. They probably want to get in the San Francisco market with Stanford and Cal, Utah. So there's a few schools out west in the Big 12 too, but none of these schools are going to win a title unless they move to the Big 10 or SEC. I think the gap's just too big in money.
No, I agree. I want to get to David's point first. These ladies said every team that got a bye in the college football playoff lost. Obviously, the seeding is stupid. You mentioned earlier something, and please hit that like button if you guys don't care. The thumbs up button, I'd greatly appreciate it. You said something earlier I kind of disagree with. I think there's a chance the SEC and Big Ten get the straight seeding.
No, I think they could get the straight seeding because they hold all the cards.
They have to have an anonymous vote. You can't even be one person. That's the scary part about it.
Yeah, unanimous, not anonymous.
Oh, what did I say?
You said anonymous.
Oh, yeah. Like a bunch of people voting, you don't know who they are.
Yeah.
But I will tell you this, and I'm not sure this will happen, but don't be completely surprised if the biggest news that comes out of this meeting is the fact that they're going to go 14 or 16 teams next year. I almost wonder if they'll just say with the straight seeding stuff, yeah, it'd be nice. That's a cherry on top. But ultimately, just getting more teams in, that's your bargaining chip. I almost believe that this straight seeding thing has just been floated out there to help them have another bargaining chip.
I think that's highly possible. And here's why here's why they don't want it. Like the NCAA tournament, Dave, you know how I've told you the NCAA tournament, you get paid for however many games your conference plays on. Like for every NCAA tournament game your conference plays, your conference gets paid. I think it's like $2 million. For teams that get a first round bye in the college football playoff, they're already getting credit for playing 2 games. So they're getting $8 million instead of $4 million. There's no way the Mountain West or the Big 12 or the ACC want to give that up.
Let me ask you this. David says there are only 4 non-SEC Big 10 teams that could win it. That'd be Notre Dame, Miami, Clemson, and Florida State. Would you add anybody to that?
No, not in this moment, and I'm not so sure they can if they don't join, except for Notre Dame. But you're right, Notre Dame's academic standards. But because this is the problem with, I mean, like, But then there's the other side of it. And I don't know if this is bad or good for the sport. Let's take the Big 12, for instance, Dave. Arizona State won it last year. The Big 12 is like, we're talking maybe a couple of ACC teams. There's a virtual 100% shot. No Big 12 teams winning a national title, right? At all.
Boy,
like, name a Big 12 win at all.
It'd have to be the perfect storm. I don't think there is one.
There isn't one. But the Big 12 has the most parity of any conference in college football this year. Arizona State was picked last in the league last year, and they won it. When's the last time a team picked last in the SEC won the conference?
It's not going to. It's never going to happen.
Never going to happen. Same with the Big 10. The team picked last is never going to win it. That makes the Big 12, honestly, in some cases, the most fun league to watch in college football, because everything in the Big 12 is about the conference race to get to the playoff.
Oh, it's a bunch of slow dudes, though. I mean,
but it's fun. It's still fun.
Caleb's and Dave's, a bunch of Caucasians. I mean, it's all right.
Hey, it's like watching those low-level college basketball teams in smaller conferences.
Yeah, General Ursa says it's time for the SEC Big Ten to break off and split the bill to bust the ACC and form a 50-team Super League. I have no problem with that.
I mean, that's what's happening. They'll probably get it up to 70. I think they're going to go really, really big and add a bunch of teams. But I think they're going to jockey and create an ALNL. They're going to try. I don't know how this is all going to end up, because parity is getting better in college football, but the money distribution is getting more uneven at the same time. So, we're going to have to see what happens. But you're right. The real move is, and maybe we'll talk about this later in the week, Dave, but I think I've got my perfect playoff format to save the conference championship games and to give everybody what they want.
All right. I like that. I want to hear it. The show represented by Banks & Jones, Tennessee's trial attorney, banksandjones.com, broadcasting from the Ted Russell Ford Lincoln studios. Ted Russell Ford Lincoln, East Tennessee's largest volume dealer. And I found my vehicle, by the way. It was like 3 o'clock in the morning, but I found it online. You can absolutely check out their inventory online, and you'll be glad you did. Again, the show represented by Banks & Jones, Tennessee's trial attorney, banksandjones.com.
Like a blast from the past, the Super Dealer is back. Look to the skies, Knoxville. The Super Dealer is fighting for price, service, and the American made. Ted Russell Ford is your Super Dealer, just in time for truck month. Save up to $5,350 on this new Ford F-150 XLT Hybrid, or save up to $7,000 on this new Ford Expedition. Come see the Super Dealer today at either Ted Russell Ford location, Parkside Drive or Kingston Pike.
Sports Treasures in North Knoxville is one of the South's largest sports cards and memorabilia dealers, featuring over 10 million sports cards from vintage to modern. Sports Treasures carries a full line of hobby boxes, singles, autographed memorabilia, Tennessee Vol collectibles, fan cave decorations, and so much more. See a museum full of collectibles at Sports Treasures, 4819 North Broadway in Fountain City, and Sports Treasures on Facebook. Sports Treasures, where the real sports fan goes to shop.
Community banking is about location and much more. It's about family. We reside in your community. We are a part of your community. At Commercial Bank, our commitment extends beyond the walls of our branches. It's displayed each day in the opportunities we provide, the money we give back, and the time we commit, all to help improve the lives of the people, families, and businesses that make our communities great. Commercial Bank, life made better.
Double D Piping provides full-service fire protection on any scale. From residential homes to government facilities, we can assist any customer through design, fabrication, installation, inspection, and demonstration of fire suppression systems. With 30 years of service across 5 states and a full staff with over 40 years experience, our quality can't be beaten. Don't get caught watching what you could have prevented. Call Double D Piping.
Frank, like the name, but serious or something. The Dave Hooker Show with Calhoun, represented by T. Scott Jones, banksandjones.com, Tennessee's trial attorney. From the Ted Russell Ford Lincoln Studio, East Tennessee's #1 volume and customer service dealer, Ted Russell Ford and TedRussellLincoln.net. Now to the Dave Hooker Show on Off the Hook Sports.
Caleb, say something smart. My headphones are broke. Please hit that like and subscribe button.
Wow, Dave. Dave doesn't know how to handle headphones. He's a total boomer. I'm just messing with him. He can't hear me right now.
Smarter than that, Caleb. Come on.
Yeah, so we were talking a little bit before about the SEC and the Big Ten, but I think I'm gonna have a column about the college football playoff. But I think going to 14 teams, there is a way to protect the integrity of the conference championship games and go to 14 teams, but you might have to do a little more of an NFL model, but it could be possible. And I'm not so sure people are prepared for my scenario for it, but I think I've got a pretty good way to do it.
Okay.
Honestly.
A couple of different comments from our message board, and we certainly appreciate that. Be sure to hit the like button if you haven't at this point. You okay, Caleb? You know what's weird is if Southern California or Oregon wasn't a part of the Big Ten, I would argue that those teams could rise up and win a championship at some point. I mean, now they're the Big Ten, so that's kind of a moot point. Adam says
they still could. All you got to do is get to the playoff.
Right, but I'm just saying that would be a Big Ten team. See what I'm saying? So Adam says if we could only take the top 16 teams and not worry about what conferences they belong to, like every other NCAA sport, we wouldn't have the need to consolidate and control like the Big Ten and SEC are doing. So,
or how about just not do a playoff? But I mean, I'm sorry. I know I've lost. I've lost that battle. I've fought it for years and I've lost. But I actually disagree with you on that, Adam, because like if you do top 14, top 16, look, let's call it what it is. If you take the top 5 or top 6 conference champions, that's not that big of a deal because then you're still taking like the top 10 at large teams. And if you can't be a top 10 at large team, you have no realistic shot of winning the title, right? You don't get to complain.
I want to argue with that. I think we've undervalued Chaz Lanier. And let's make it a poll question of some shape, form, or fashion. Have we undervalued Chaz Lanier? Chaz Lanier, to me, is not considered a great player in Tennessee's fans' eyes because of Dalton Connect happening last year. And it doesn't hurt that Dalton Connect is still having a fantastic season in the NBA, that he's going to be a standout player. He's a generational player. But Chaz Lanier averages about 18 points a game. Dalton Connect, I think, was at 22, if you want to double check my math on that. But I have this feeling that Chaz Lanier might not be as good as Dalton Connect, but I feel like he knows his role, and that could end up paying off in the in the NCAA tournament.
So this is a very interesting topic, and when you brought it up to me today, I kind of thought about it. And Chaz Lanier just earned SEC Player of the Week. Kudos to him for that. 30 points at Texas.
Third time, by the way. Go ahead.
Third time this year. 30 points at Texas A&M. Here's why Chaz Lanier, I don't think. I'm actually going to disagree with you a little bit. I don't necessarily think Chaz Lanier's being underappreciated because I don't think even at the beginning of the year, yes, some people were comparing him to Dalton Connect. We backed off that a little bit. I think but I don't think he's underappreciated because here's, I think, the problem with Chaz Lanier, and it's something that bothers me. It's not his greatness or what he can or can't do. It's when he disappears. And there is a clutch issue still with Chaz Lanier that bothers me. It bothers me that against Auburn, when Tennessee went for the win, a game-winning 3, that Rick Barnes called it for Zakai Ziegler, not Chaz Lanier. It bothers me that over the weekend, that as great as Chaz Lanier was with 30 points, Zakai Ziegler closed the deal in the final 2 minutes, and I'm like, he's not even a scorer. It also bothers me that Rick Barnes one time called a play for Chaz Lanier going out of the locker room to start the second half, and Chaz Lanier didn't score, and Rick Barnes had to pull him to the bench. And I'm like, he's a scoring guard. He's not like Tony Harris trying to alternate between 1 and 2 guard. No, he's a scoring guard. His job is to be the shooting guard. Period. End of story. If you are the scoring job, if your job is to score and the coach calls a play for you to score and you pass that up, that tells me he has absolutely no killer instinct whatsoever. And honestly, to that end, that's what bothers me about Chaz Lanier. I'm not saying that he has to be as good as Dalton Connect. I thought he might be. I was wrong. That's okay that I was wrong. Looks like he's probably not as good of a three-point shooter as Chris Lofton was, even though he looked that way earlier in the year. I'm wrong on that. That's totally fine. What I'm not wrong, and what I didn't see from Chaz Lanier, and at the beginning of the year, though, I guess where I am wrong now, because I also didn't see this, is his disappearing in crunch time, not taking that shot, missing the free throw to tie the game against Vanderbilt. There are too many moments in which Chaz Lanier has not shown up when the game was on the line and palms got sweaty. And that stands out because you want your assassin to be able to do that.
Okay. Let me ask, I think I know the answer to this question, brought to you by Joe Newbert Collision Center. For nearly 50 years, Newbert Collision Center has been East Tennessee's best choice for quality repair work and fantastic customer service. Caleb, would you take Chris Lofton over Chaz Lanier?
Yes. Yes. Okay. Chris Lofton's a better three-point shooter, and Chris Lofton is more clutch.
Okay. How big is the clutch thing?
For a scorer, it's huge to me. I mean, if you're, it's not big to me if you're LeBron, even though actually people act like Kobe's more clutch than LeBron. Look at the data. LeBron's actually a more clutch player than Kobe. But it's never a big deal to me if you're like the wing or the small forward or the distributor, ever. Because your job's not, but if you're just the scorer, if your job is just to be the scorer, you've got to be the clutch player in the final 2 minutes.
Can't argue that. The UPS store, Hardin Valley, helping individuals and small businesses, wide range of products and services locally owned and operated. But I did make you think. So if Chaz Lanier is even close to Chris Lofton, hasn't this season been a success for him?
I mean, he's already close to Chris Lofton. So I think we would already call this season a success for him. I mean, he's already close. I just don't think he hasn't been able to manufacture buckets when the shots aren't falling. That's been a problem. And he's taken himself out of games when things have gone wrong for him, when things have gone awry. And I think that just relying on his ability to shoot a good percentage from three, and hope that he does or doesn't on a nightly basis, I mean, that becomes a problem. And that might
go ahead.
That might work over a 7-game series, but in the NCAA tournament, you don't get a 7-game series. You get one and done. What happens when he's off shooting the ball in a game?
Matt says Chaz can't be on fire on threes every game. He needs to be more dynamic when he is starting to show, actually. And that again speaks to Dalton Knecht, because Dalton Knecht was dynamic. He would take it to the hoop. So that to me is still, I think, plays into my column strength. And that is that he's compared to Dalton Knecht too much. If Dalton Knecht decided to go, and I don't remember which schools he was considering other than Tennessee, but if he went to Vanderbilt, are you telling me that we wouldn't be discussing Chaz Lanier as an elite player?
I mean, we still kind of are, aren't we? Now, maybe he's not getting the pub he should, but and I could get that.
I mean, if you had to pick good, great, elite, what would you pick?
Great. I would go great. I'm not going elite. I'm not putting Chaz Lanier in the level with Allen Houston or Chris Lofton or these like Chaz Lanier is probably not going to be an All-American this year. Put it that way.
Agreed.
And so that's elite.
Well, Dalton finished second in NCAA Player of the Year.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, Dalton's there. It's like Dalton, Grant Williams, Chris Lofton. I mean, those guys are just on a level of their own. I'm seeing, with Chaz Lanier, I don't want to go as low as Scooter McFadden, but like maybe Jordan McRae senior year.
Scooter McFadden. There's a
Scotty Hobson, maybe right around there.
I could take Scotty Hobson. I'm not going to go Scooter McFadden. Maybe you like Scooter a little bit more than I do.
No. I funny enough, I'm not a Scooter fan at all. I'm just saying, like, that scoring guard that just disappears when a shot's not falling or when it's crunch time. And I think that really stands out that, that's a big concerning issue. Now, look, let's be fair to Chaz Lanier. Maybe he was recruited. Maybe he was signed just to do this. And the problem is that Darlington Dubar never emerged the way people wanted him to.
That's true. And let me offer this too. Chaz Lanier, you say, is not as good as Chris Lofton. And most of the people agree with you, although David just said Chaz Lanier should be first team all SEC. Given his size, wouldn't you prefer Chaz over Lofton in the NCAA tournament? I know he hit the incredible shot against Winthrop, but he's a guy who, going against lesser schools especially, is going to be able to get his shot off most of the time.
Well, because of the way Chris Lofton faded away, Chris Lofton never had trouble getting his shot off despite his lack of length. That was kind of he had an awkward shooting motion. The only thing that calls Chris Lofton the year Tennessee would have won the national title was his testicular cancer. His senior year, his shot was not consistent. And he still set the record that year for threes, which is crazy to think about. But when Louisville played that complex 1-3-1 zone defense, and the length and the ability to put the ball on the floor wasn't there, and he just was off shooting that day, and it cost him. And Tennessee did not have a good point guard that year. But I
feel like this is how it's going to play out. Chaz is going to play one great game in the NCAA tournament and then have a dud game, and Tennessee's going to lose.
The good news for Tennessee is they can win if Chaz Lanier has a dud game. They've been doing that throughout a lot of SEC play, to be fair. So, I mean, we can just go down the list, but Chaz Lanier, he's played well the last 2 games. But, I mean, he was okay against Oklahoma. I mean, he was 3 of 10 from 3. And, I mean, I guess he did score 21 points. But at Missouri, he was only 2 of 5. He only had 10 points, and Tennessee won 85-81. That was a big road win. So I think there's times where Chaz Lanier can – oh, and then at Georgia – let's not forget the Georgia game. He was 1 of 9 from 3 against Georgia and had 5 points, and Tennessee still beat Georgia 74-56. And then he was 2 of 6 from 3 with just 10 points at Texas. Tennessee won 74-70. So they have found ways to win without Chaz Lanier, which is a good sign.
Derek says, I like our top to bottom roster. I actually believe they can win it all. Even as down as I am on Barnes, it would be a great story for Barnes. These players play unselfish basketball, and that's big. They do. But, man, they could really use a Dalton Connect to take it to the rim every once in a while, couldn't they?
They could. And also, again, they play too unselfish. That's the point. Chaz Lanier is passing up shots when he shouldn't. And that's the issue.
The show represented by Banks & Jones, Tennessee's trial attorney, banksandjones.com, as we broadcast from the Ted Russell Ford Lincoln Studios, East Tennessee's largest volume dealer on Parkside Drive and Kingston Pike. As we remind you, we are with you each and every weekday at 10 a.m., and we absolutely love it.
Why Banks & Jones? Well, it's because they're Tennessee's trial attorney. You can play to win with Banks & Jones because they'll go to trial. You've heard of other lawyers. They say they'll go to trial and fight for you. They won't. They just want to settle. That's the easiest way out. Well, that's not Banks & Jones, led by T. Scott Jones. They won't settle. They'll go to trial for you. Tennessee's trial attorney. They play to win. Truly Tennessee's trial attorney when it comes to criminal defense or personal injury. Why settle? It's Banks & Jones. T. Scott Jones. banksandjones.com. Dave Hooker here for Dynasty Pools and Spas. Your home for the best spas and everything you need to jump right in. Relaxing? Therapeutic? Absolutely. But what sets Dynasty Pools and Spas apart from others is that you get everything with any spa purchase. You get the cover lift, the steps, delivery, and chemicals. When Dynasty Pools and Spas delivers your spa from their Athens location within 125 miles, you'll get your own personal hydrotherapy spa. Mention me, Dave Hooker, or Off the Hook Sports, and get $500 off your top quality new spa. Dynasty Pools and Spas, just off the Athens exit. Drop in and receive a free gift from Off the Hook Sports, Dynasty Pools and Spas. Mention Off the Hook Sports for a drop-in prize and that $500 discount, Dynasty Pools and Spas. To check out some of the Dynasty Spa models and to buy spa chemicals, go to dynastypoolsandspas.com. Dynasty Pools and Spas.
Now in its 45th year, the second and third generations continue Joe Newbert's commitment.
His vision of what this business needed to be, we still try to live up to that.
Joe Newbert Collision Center.
Are you ready to get strong? At NFC, we offer top-notch weight training and functional fitness, so you can build strength and improve your performance. Join today at nfc1.com or stop by any one of our 7.
Here we go. It was a huge waste of time, like bringing a married guy to Vegas.
Then there's this guy, the Dave Hooker Show with Caleb Calhoun. Represented by T. Scott Jones, banksandjones.com, Tennessee's trial attorney. From the Ted Russell Ford Lincoln Studio, East Tennessee's #1 volume and customer service dealer, Ted Russell Ford and TedRussellLincoln.net. Now to the Dave Hooker Show on Off the Hook Sports.
All right, Caleb, give me a final tease on the poll question, and then we will address some comments in the chat box as well. But give us a final tease, if you don't mind, what our poll question is. Is it the Karl Malone question?
No, it's not. It's Chaz Ladier underappreciated. And
don't give me the results just yet.
I'm not. I'm just giving you the options.
Okay.
It's either yes, Dalton Connect's greatness hurt him, or no, he's not clutch enough.
It's pretty good. I like the way you just cut it right down the middle. Broadcasting with the Ted Russell Ford Lincoln Studios, East Tennessee's largest volume dealer on Parkside Drive in Kingston Pike.
Like a blast from the past, the Super Dealer is back. Look to the skies, Knoxville. The Super Dealer is fighting for price, service, and the American made. Ted Russell Ford is your Super Dealer, just in time for Truck Month. Save up to $5,350 on this new Ford F-150 XLT Hybrid, or save up to $7,000 on this new Ford Expedition. Come see the Super Dealer today at either Ted Russell Ford.
All right, Caleb, what are the results?
The results are my side wins. No, he's not clutch enough leads at 55%, and Connect's greatness hurts him is at 45%.
For Caleb Calhoun, I'm Dave Hooker, the show represented by Banks & Jones, Tennessee's trial attorney, banksandjones.com, from the Ted Russell Ford Lincoln Studios. We'll talk to you each and every weekday at 10 a.m. Eastern. We appreciate it. Hit the like button.